The accusation hung in the air of their pristine, minimalist living room, colder and sharper than the Boston winter wind rattling the windows. "You did this," Liam said, his voice devoid of the warmth Ilara had built her world around. He slid a tablet across the marble coffee table. On the screen were spreadsheets, emails, a digital trail that painted her as a corporate spy, her own name, twisted into a weapon against her. "You betrayed me. You betrayed our family." Ilara's hand instinctively went to the gentle swell of her stomach, a silent plea for the man she loved to see her, to see the truth. But the eyes that met hers were those of a stranger, a judge, an executioner. The scent of roasted chicken and rosemary filled their Beacon Hill brownstone, a warm, savory shield against the encroaching November chill. Ilara hummed along to a quiet jazz station, gently basting the bird while her eyes drifted to the architectural sketches laid out on the granite island. It was a preliminary design for a new community library, a pro bono project she'd taken on. It felt good to create something for people, not just for profit. At 6 months pregnant, she was embracing a slower pace, nesting in the luxurious comfort Liam's success afforded them. Their life was a carefully constructed masterpiece. Liam Sterling, a tech wunderkind who'd built his empire, Sterling Innovations, from a dorm room dream into a global powerhouse. And her, Ilara Vance, a respected architect whose firm had recently won a lucrative consulting contract with his. They were Boston's golden couple, their love story as polished as the antique silverware in their drawers. "Smells like heaven in here," Liam's voice boomed from the doorway. He dropped his leather briefcase with a heavy thud, shrugging off his cashmere coat. He looked exhausted, the lines around his blue eyes etched deeper than usual. Ilara smiled, wiping her hands on her apron as she went to him. "Tough day?" she asked, wrapping her arms around his neck and breathing in his familiar scent of expensive cologne and city air. He sighed, melting into her embrace. "You have no idea. The board is breathing down my neck about the Helios launch. Any leak, any delay, and our stock will tank." He kissed her forehead, then knelt, placing a hand on her belly. "How's my little co-conspirator doing? He's been practicing his soccer kicks all day," she laughed. "Right on my bladder, mostly." It was their nightly ritual, this quiet moment of connection that made the pressures of their world fade away. But lately, a new name had begun to punctuate these moments, a name that always seemed to be attached to Liam's stress. "Amelia. Thank God for Amelia," he said, straightening up as he loosened his tie. "She handled the press inquiries today. She's a shark. Managed to kill a negative story before it even got legs." Amelia Harding was Liam's COO, a woman who was as ruthlessly efficient as she was impeccably dressed. Ilara had met her a few times at company galas. She was sharp, beautiful, with an unnerving ability to hold your gaze a second too long. Ilara had tried to like her, for Liam's sake, but there was a coldness to her, a transactional quality to her every interaction that set Ilara's teeth on edge. "She seems very dedicated," Ilara offered, choosing her words carefully. "Dedicated doesn't even cover it," Liam said, grabbing a glass from the cabinet. "She's the only one who really gets what's at stake. She's been living at the office, practically." He paused, pouring himself a whiskey. "She actually flagged a potential security issue on the consulting side of the project today. With your firm's remote access portal, a prickle of unease ran down Ilara's spine. "Oh, my team lead didn't mention anything." She handled it directly. Said it was probably nothing, just a ghost in the machine. But she wanted to be thorough. She's always one step ahead. He took a long sip of his drink. "You know, I wish your team was half as proactive as she is. The criticism, though small, stung. Ilara's firm was one of the best in the city. We have excellent security protocols, Liam. We've never had a breach. I know, I'm just stressed. He ran a hand through his dark hair. Amelia's just on another level. She gets it. She gets me. The words hung in the air, heavier than he intended. She gets me. Ilara busied herself at the counter, her earlier joy evaporating like steam from a pot. She told herself it was the pregnancy hormones making her sensitive, the primal fear of a mother protecting her nest. Liam was stressed, and Amelia was his professional rock. It was nothing more. A week later, at a charity auction, the unease returned with a vengeance. Ilara was chatting with another architect when Amelia materialized at Liam's side, a vision in a sleek emerald dress. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on his arm, leaning in to whisper something in his ear. It was an intimate gesture, possessive. Liam laughed, his head tilted towards hers. For a moment, they looked like the couple, and Ilara, standing just a few feet away, felt like an outsider. She moved to join them, her smile feeling brittle. Amelia, good to see you. Amelia's eyes swept over Ilara's growing belly with a flicker of something unreadable before her professional mask snapped back into place. Ilara, you're glowing. Liam, we need to talk to Mr. Chen before he leaves. He's wavering on the Q3 investment. She didn't release his arm, instead giving it a slight tug. Right. Honey, you mind? Liam asked, already turning to go. Of course not, Ilara said, her voice lighter than she felt. She watched them walk away, a perfectly matched pair of predators cutting through the crowd. It wasn't just that Amelia was his COO. It was the way she looked at him, with a hunger that had nothing to do with business. And it was the way Liam was starting to look at Ilara, not with less love, but with a new, subtle distance, as if seeing her through a pane of glass someone else had installed. That night, as she lay in bed, feeling her son kick, a cold dread settled in her heart. The foundation of her beautiful life felt fragile, as if a fault line was tracing its way through their home, silent and unseen, waiting for the right moment to crack everything wide open. The first tremor came disguised as a technical glitch. Ilara was in her home office, finalizing a render for the library project, when an urgent email from her firm's IT department popped up. Mandatory security update, immediate action required. It looked legitimate, down to the company letterhead. She clicked the link, entered her credentials, and watched a progress bar fill. A few minutes later, her system was back to normal. She thought nothing more of it. 2 weeks later, the earthquake hit. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sky outside was a bruised purple, threatening a winter storm. Liam had called her an hour earlier, his voice clipped and strange. Stay home. I need to talk to you when I get back. Don't go anywhere. The ominous tone had sent a spiral of anxiety through her. She'd been trying to call him back, but he wasn't picking up. Now she heard his key in the lock. The sound was harsh, violent. He walked into the living room, his face a granite mask of fury. He wasn't alone. Amelia was with him, standing just behind his shoulder, her expression a careful blend of concern and sorrow. It was a masterful performance. Liam, what's wrong? You're scaring me, Ilara said, rising from the sofa. That's when he slid the tablet across the coffee table. The moment from her nightmares. You did this. Her mind struggled to catch up with the venom in his voice. She picked up the tablet, her hands trembling. It was a file, a dossier of betrayal. There were emails, seemingly sent from her personal account to a competitor, containing sensitive data about the Helios project. Proprietary algorithms, launch timelines, marketing strategies. There were financial records showing a large payment into an offshore account that had been opened in her name. There were logs showing her user credentials accessing the secure Sterling Innovation server at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. This is insane, she stammered, scrolling through the fabricated evidence. Liam, this isn't real. Someone faked this. Did they? He shot back, his voice raw. Did they fake your resentment, Ilara? The little comments about how my work was consuming our lives? The complaints about me being married to the company? Ilara's head snapped up. Those were her words, yes, but they had been whispered to him in moments of tired intimacy, fears she had shared in the safety of their bed. They were now being repeated back to her as motive. She looked past Liam to Amelia, who was watching her with cold, pitying eyes. And she understood. She's been talking to you, Ilara whispered, a horrifying clarity cutting through her shock. She's been twisting everything. Amelia has been my only ally in this. Liam roared, his face contorted. She's the one who discovered the breach. She's the one who has been working for a week straight, trying to trace it, hoping against hope it wasn't you. Amelia stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Liam's arm. Liam, maybe we should calm down. This is a shock for everyone. Don't you dare touch him, Ilara snarled, a protective, primal anger surging through her. This is you. This has your fingerprints all over it. My fingerprints? Amelia asked, her voice breaking artfully. Ilara, I've done nothing but try to protect this company, protect Liam. When I saw the data packets were being routed from your firm's IP block, I didn't want to believe it. I ran every other possible scenario. But the trail, it was undeniable. It led straight to your laptop, the mandatory security update, the phishing email. It had been a keylogger, a Trojan horse. Amelia hadn't just framed her. She had used Ilara's own hand to do it. Liam, listen to me, Ilara pleaded, turning back to her husband, her heart fracturing. She is lying. I love you. I would never, ever do this. Look at me. I am carrying your son. She took a step towards him, her hands outstretched. He flinched back as if she were poison. That small movement shattered her more than the shouting. See, the timing is almost poetic, isn't it? Liam said, his voice dropping to a lethally quiet register. Secure a nest egg just before the baby comes. Set yourself up for life in case something happened to me or the company. Is that it? No, she cried, tears finally breaking free, hot and useless. How can you even think that? Amelia showed me everything, he continued, his voice a monotone of conviction. The data doesn't lie. The money doesn't lie. We are facing SEC investigations, lawsuits from our shareholders. Everything I have ever worked for is on the verge of collapsing. Because of you. Each word was a physical blow. He wasn't just accusing her. He had already convicted her. There was no room for doubt in his mind. No space for her truth. Amelia had spent months preparing the ground, planting seeds of mistrust, watering them with carefully chosen words and manipulated moments, and now her poisonous garden was in full bloom. Get your things, Liam said, his voice flat, his eyes staring at a point on the wall just past her head. I want you out. Tonight. Liam, no, please, she begged, the floor seeming to tilt beneath her feet. We can talk about this. We can hire someone. A real investigator. I've already spoken to my lawyers, he cut her off, They'll be in touch with yours, if you have one. He turned and walked towards the door, Amelia following silently in his wake. At the threshold, he stopped but didn't turn around. The locks will be changed in the morning. Don't try to come back. Then he was gone. The heavy front door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the sudden cavernous silence of the room. Ilara stood alone, the tablet still in her hand, its screen glowing with the architecture of her own destruction. The life she had known, the man she had loved, the future she had been carrying, it had all been a lie. And the truth didn't matter at all. The first few hours were a blur of disbelief. Ilara wandered through the house, their house, touching the furniture, the photos on the mantelpiece, as if they belonged to a stranger. It felt like a stage set for a life that had just been cancelled. The smell of the roasted chicken she had so lovingly prepared now seemed sickeningly ironic. Reality began to seep in with the cold. Liam had turned off the heating remotely, a petty, cruel gesture that spoke volumes. Shivering, she packed a single suitcase, her movements clumsy and robotic. Clothes, her laptop, the ultrasound photos of their son. What else do you take when your life has been set on fire? Her credit card was declined when she tried to book a hotel room. A cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She tried another. Declined. He'd already cut her off. She checked her bank account on her phone. Balance, 0 $0. He had systematically, efficiently, and completely erased her. She drove aimlessly through the glittering streets of Boston, the Christmas lights mocking her despair. The car was in her name, a small Mercy, but it was running on fumes. She had nowhere to go. Her parents were gone, passed away years ago, and her closest friends were all enmeshed in Liam's world. Calling them would be useless. The story of her betrayal would have already been spun, Liam the victim, her the villainous, greedy wife. The next morning, the professional axe fell. A call from John, the senior partner at her firm. His voice was strained, official. Ilara, I don't know what to say. We've been informed by Sterling Innovations that our contract is terminated, effective immediately. They cited a major security breach originating from your consulting credentials. There was a pause. We have to let you go. And we're being investigated. Our reputation. Ilara, what did you do? I did nothing, John, she said, her voice hollow. I was framed. But the words sounded weak even to her own ears. The evidence was too complete, the narrative too clean. She was ruined. In a single day, she had lost her husband, her home, her career, and her reputation. She spent the next 2 nights sleeping in her car in a 24-hour supermarket parking lot, curled awkwardly in the back seat, the steering wheel digging into her pregnant belly. Each morning, she woke up with a gasp, the reality of her situation crashing down anew. She was a caricature of a tragedy, the pregnant, homeless woman cast out into the cold. On the 3rd day, desperate and hungry, she sold her engagement ring. The diamond Liam had chosen, which she had once thought symbolized their unbreakable bond, was slid off her finger and appraised by a pawnshop owner with bored eyes. He gave her a fraction of what it was worth, but the cash in her hand felt like a lifeline. It was enough for a room in a dingy motel by the highway, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and the lingering smell of stale smoke. As she lay on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, the full weight of her isolation pressed down on her. It wasn't just the loss of comfort and security. It was the profound, soul-crushing loneliness. The man who had vowed to protect her, who had placed a hand on her stomach and promised their son the world, had not only abandoned her, but had actively orchestrated her destruction. The psychological warfare was relentless. Her name was dragged through the mud in financial blogs and gossip columns. Anonymous sources from Sterling Innovations painted a picture of a calculating, unstable woman. She stopped looking at the internet, but the shame followed her, a phantom presence in her motel room. Depression began to set in, a thick gray fog that made it hard to breathe, hard to even move. What was the point? Her life was over. Liam had won. Amelia had won. Sometimes she would place a hand on her belly and feel nothing, a terrifying numbness where maternal joy was supposed to be. The baby felt less like a promise and more like a complication, a tether to a life that had been violently ripped away. The thought shamed her, sending her into fresh spirals of despair. One evening, staring at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, she saw a ghost. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow and haunted. She was disappearing, fading away under the weight of the betrayal. Then she felt it. A strong, definitive kick from within. Not a flutter, but a solid thump, a tiny person demanding to be noticed. "I'm still here," it seemed to say. "And so are you." Another kick, stronger this time. Tears streamed down Alara's face, but these were different. They weren't tears of self-pity, but of something else. A flicker of defiance. They had taken her husband, her home, her name. But this child was hers. He was an innocent in this nightmare, and he deserved a mother who would fight for him. She looked at her reflection again, really looked. The ghost was still there, but behind its eyes, a tiny ember began to glow. They had left her with nothing, which meant she had nothing left to lose. The fall had been brutal, shocking, and absolute. But she was at the bottom now, and the only way to go from the bottom was up. The thought didn't bring comfort, not yet. But it brought a sliver of purpose. And for now, that was enough. The pawnshop money didn't last long. Alara knew the motel was a temporary stopgap, a way to bleed cash while she spiraled. With the last of her funds, she paid a deposit on a tiny, furnished room in a shared house in Dorchester, a world away from the manicured lawns of Beacon Hill. The room was sparse, a single bed, a rickety dresser, a window that overlooked a brick wall. But it was a roof. It was a start. Finding work was a humbling, brutal ordeal. The name Alara Vance was now toxic in the architectural world. Her impressive resume was worthless. After dozens of rejections, she took the only job she could get, washing dishes and bussing tables at a small, family-owned diner called the Morning Star. The work was grueling. She spent hours on her feet, her back aching, her hands raw from hot water and cleaning chemicals. The smell of grease clung to her clothes and hair. Her coworkers were kind but wary, keeping a respectful distance from the quiet, obviously pregnant woman who carried a profound sadness in her eyes. She was an anomaly in their world, and she knew it. Yet, in the rhythm of the work, she found a strange sort of peace. There was no room for despair when you had to get 10 orders of pancakes out. There was an honesty to the exhaustion she felt at the end of each day, a physical ache that overshadowed the emotional one. She was earning her keep, dollar by dollar. She was surviving. Her most regular customer was a woman named Carol, who came in every morning at 7:00 a.m. sharp for black coffee and a crossword puzzle. Carol was in her late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, a no-nonsense haircut, and a wardrobe of comfortable but well-made clothes. She had the air of someone who had seen it all and wasn't impressed by much. She was also the first person to truly see Alara, One morning, as Ilara refilled her coffee, her hand trembled, sloshing a few drops onto the table. "Sorry," she mumbled, quickly wiping it up. Carol put her hand over Ilara's. Her skin was cool and dry. "It's all right, dear. You look like you're about to fall over. Sit down for a minute." "I can't, I'm working." "Sit," Carol said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Hesitantly, Ilara slid into the booth opposite her. "You're not built for this work," Carol stated, not unkindly. "Your hands are an architect's hands." Ilara stared at her, stunned. "How did you know? I was a corporate lawyer for 40 years. I know how to read people, and I know how to use the internet," Carol said with a wry smile. The story was messy. High-flying husband, a spectacular fall from grace, but it didn't add up. The accusations were too neat, too perfect, smelled like a setup to me from the beginning. Tears welled in Ilara's eyes. To be believed, so simply and completely, by a total stranger, it was like a dam breaking inside her. She told Carol everything. The whole sordid, painful story poured out of her in a hushed, desperate torrent in the corner of the noisy diner. Carol listened patiently, her gaze never wavering, just nodding occasionally as she sipped her coffee. When Ilara finished, her voice hoarse, Carol simply said, "He's a fool, and you are much stronger than you think." That conversation was the beginning of a friendship that became Ilara's lifeline. Carol became her confidant, her mentor, her surrogate mother. When she found out about Ilara's living situation, she was appalled. "You can't raise a baby in a shoebox," she declared one afternoon. "I have a spare room. My kids are grown and gone. The house is too quiet. You'll move in with me. It's not a request." And so, Ilara moved into Carol's cozy, book-filled home in a quiet, leafy suburb. For the first time in months, she felt safe. She had a home again, not one of luxury, but one filled with warmth and genuine care. Carol pushed her. Not hard, but persistently. She bought her a professional set of drawing pencils and a sketchbook. "You need to use your gift," she said. "Not for them, for you." At first, Ilara couldn't. The act of designing was tied to the life she'd lost. But one evening, sitting in the quiet living room, she started to sketch. She didn't draw buildings. She drew the faces she saw at the diner. She drew the gnarled oak tree in Carol's backyard. And slowly, she began to draw designs for baby furniture. A clever, convertible crib, a mobile with perfectly balanced, interlocking wooden birds. Her creativity, once a source of professional pride, became a form of healing. It was a way to process her pain and channel her hope. She was no longer Ilara Vance, disgraced architect. She was Ilara, a mother-to-be, creating a small, beautiful world for her son with her own two hands. She started attending a community prenatal group, connecting with other expectant mothers. They talked about morning sickness and nursery colors, not stock prices and corporate takeovers. It was a world grounded in simple, profound truths. Here, she wasn't a headline. She was just Ilara. Her belly grew, and with it, her strength. She was still scarred, still haunted by the ghost of her past life. But the embers of hope, first kindled by the kick of her unborn son, were being fanned into a steady flame. She was building a new foundation, not of steel and glass, but of resilience, friendship, and a fierce, quiet love for the child she would soon bring into the world. Liam's life, on the surface, had returned to a semblance of order. The Helios project, after a frantic period of damage control, was back on track. The threatened lawsuits had been averted, the scandal contained. Amelia, now a fixture in his home and his life, was a constant, reassuring presence at his side, the architect of his professional salvation. He should have been relieved. He should have been grateful. Instead, a quiet, corrosive unease was setting in. The Beacon Hill brownstone, once filled with Alara's warmth and laughter, now felt cold and cavernously empty, despite Amelia's attempts to fill it. She replaced Alara's muted, tasteful art with bold, abstract pieces that felt jarring and aggressive. She hosted lavish dinner parties for investors and board members, playing the part of the perfect corporate spouse with chilling precision. But there was no heart in it. The house was no longer a home. It was a showroom. Liam found himself increasingly irritated by small things. The way Amelia would talk down to the housekeeping staff, her voice dripping with condescension. The way she needed constant praise for every minor business victory. The way she would subtly disparage Alara, bringing her up in conversation only to highlight her own superior loyalty. "It's a miracle we saved the launch," she'd say, pouring him a drink. "If I hadn't caught what Alara did when I did, well, it doesn't bear thinking about." He would nod along, but the words started to ring hollow. He remembered Alara's passion for her work, her meticulous attention to detail. Betrayal for money seemed so grotesquely out of character. He had been so blinded by his panic and rage, so expertly guided by Amelia's narrative, that he had refused to see the woman he had known and loved for 5 years. The first real crack in his conviction appeared during a quarterly financial review. They were looking at the budget for the Helios project, specifically the line items from the period of the data breach. He noticed a consultancy fee paid to a third-party cybersecurity firm he didn't recognize. "What's this digital ghost firm?" he asked, pointing to the screen. Amelia glanced at it, barely breaking stride in her presentation. "Oh, that was the firm I hired to do the initial deep dive when I first suspected a leak. They were discreet, expensive, but they confirmed my fears and helped me gather the initial evidence against Alara. Something about her answer felt too smooth. Why have I never heard of them? Why wasn't this in your initial report to me?" "It was a chaotic time, Liam," she said, her voice like silk. "I was managing a dozen crises at once. I paid them out of a discretionary fund to avoid raising alarms internally. I was protecting you, protecting the company. Does it matter?" It did. It mattered immensely. Liam had built his company on transparency. Hiding a vendor, especially one involved in such a critical incident, was a cardinal sin. For the first time, he didn't see a brilliant COO protecting her CEO. He saw a woman who was comfortable with secrets. That night, unable to sleep, he went into Alara's old home office. Amelia had wanted to change it into a guest room, but he'd forbidden it, a decision he hadn't understood himself at the time. It was exactly as Alara had left it. Her scent, faint and floral, still clung to the air. On her desk, beneath a stack of papers, was the sketchbook for the community library. He sat down and flipped through the pages. Detailed, beautiful drawings filled with light and purpose. This was the work of a creator, not a destroyer. He saw her notes in the margins, her elegant handwriting full of passion for the project. Could the woman who designed this beautiful, selfless space be capable of the ugly, selfish betrayal he'd condemned her for? His suppressed guilt, a beast he had kept locked away, began to stir. He remembered her face that day, the raw shock, the desperate plea in her eyes. He remembered the way she had clutched her pregnant belly, not as a shield, but as if trying to protect their son from his own father's monstrous words. He had called her a traitor. He had thrown her out, pregnant, with his child. The thought was a physical sickness. He stumbled into the bathroom and retched, his body convulsing with a shame so profound it felt like it was tearing him apart. He spent the rest of the night digging. He went back through old emails, text messages, calendars. He started piecing together a timeline, not of Ilara's supposed crime, but of Amelia's rise to power within his life. He saw the pattern now, the subtle whispers, the manufactured urgencies, the way she had slowly isolated him from his other advisors and from his wife. She hadn't just framed Ilara, she had groomed him, the CEO of a billion-dollar company, like a mark. He found an old email from Ilara, sent a month before the disaster. "I'm worried you're burning out," she'd written. "Amelia seems to be pushing you harder than ever. Please, let's take that weekend trip we talked about. I miss my husband." He had replied with a curt, one-line response, something Amelia had helped him draft. Can't. Too much at stake with Helios. He had chosen the company over his wife. He had chosen Amelia's ambition over Ilara's love. The seed of doubt had been planted. And now, watered by his suffocating guilt, it was beginning to grow into a terrifying, unshakable tree of suspicion. He had made a catastrophic mistake. The only question was how deep the deception went, and if it was too late to undo any of it. Liam felt like a man waking from a long, drugged sleep. The world he had accepted as reality was shimmering, threatening to dissolve. The next morning, he called Marcus Thorne, a man who owed him a favor. Marcus wasn't a corporate drone. He was a former military intelligence officer who now ran a boutique private investigation firm that specialized in the kind of digital forensics that made corporate PIs look like amateurs. They met in a discreet coffee shop far from the financial district. Liam, his face pale and drawn, laid out the basics. He didn't mention Ilara by name. He simply said he had reason to believe the official report on the Helios data breach was flawed, and that he needed a fresh, untraceable investigation into its origins. "I want you to operate completely off the books, Marcus," Liam said, his voice low. "No one at Sterling can know about this, especially not my COO, Amelia Harding. I want you to look at her too." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. He just nodded. "I'll start with the phantom cybersecurity firm, Digital Ghost. See if they even exist." 2 days later, Marcus called. They don't. The company was a shell, registered to a P.O. box in Delaware and dissolved a week after you paid the invoice. The money was wired from there to an account in the Caymans. Liam's blood ran cold. "Keep digging." Marcus's next move was to get inside Sterling Innovation's servers, not through the front door, but through the back. Using a zero-day exploit he'd been saving for a special occasion, he slipped past the company's firewalls and began to sift through the digital ashes of the breach. He examined the raw data logs, the ones Amelia had supposedly used to build her case against Ilara. The evidence of a frame job, Marcus later explained, was glaringly obvious to a trained eye. It was clumsy, but effective, he told Liam over a secure line. The data packets weren't just routed from your wife's IP, they were mirrored. The real origin point was masked by a series of proxy servers, but the initial request, the one that started the whole chain, it came from inside your house. Specifically, from a desktop computer in your COO's office on the 34th floor. Liam felt the air leave his lungs. Amelia's office. "There's more," Marcus said. "She used a keylogger to get your wife's credentials. The phishing email was amateur hour, but it worked. But she made a mistake. She installed the keylogger from her own machine, and to cover her tracks, she used a cloud-based file shredder to wipe the installation logs. What she didn't count on was the cloud service having a 7-day rolling backup. The final piece of the puzzle, the smoking gun, arrived in Liam's encrypted inbox an hour later. It was an audio file recovered from that backup. It was a phone call Amelia had made to an unknown man, dated the day after she had presented her evidence to Liam. Her voice was giddy, triumphant. It worked perfectly, she purred into the phone. He bought every last word, threw the pregnant bitch out on the street the same night. No, he's completely broken. He thinks I'm the only one he can trust. He's mine now. The company, the man, all of it. Don't worry. You'll get your money as soon as I have full control of his personal accounts. She'll never see it coming. No one will. Liam listened to the recording 3 times. The sound of Amelia's triumphant, venomous voice clawing at his insides. The betrayal was so absolute, so profoundly evil, it was almost incomprehensible. She hadn't just wanted his affection or his money. She had wanted to annihilate Ilara, to erase her from existence and take her place. And he, blinded by his own arrogance and fear, had handed her the tools to do it. That evening, he went home and waited. When Amelia walked in, smiling, holding up 2 tickets to a symphony, he didn't say a word. He just played the recording. He watched her face as her own voice filled the room. The initial confusion, the flicker of recognition, the dawning horror, and then the complete collapse of her carefully constructed facade. The blood drained from her face, leaving a sickly, pale mask. "Liam, I can explain," she stammered, the tickets fluttering from her hand to the floor. "Can you?" he asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Can you explain how you methodically destroyed an innocent woman? My wife? The mother of my child?" He took a step forward, his rage a palpable force in the room. "Can you explain how you looked me in the eye and lied day after day while I was grieving a betrayal that you invented?" She tried to pivot, to manipulate. "I did it for you. For us. She was holding you back. She didn't appreciate you." "Get out!" he roared, the sound echoing off the cold marble floors. "Get out of my house. Get out of my company. Get out of my life." He picked up his phone. "I have security on their way up to escort you out. If you ever come near me, my family, or my company again, I will release this recording to the authorities, and I will spend the rest of my life ensuring you rot in a prison cell. Am I clear?" She stared at him, her eyes filled not with remorse, but with pure, unadulterated hatred for having been caught. She snatched her purse from the table and, without another word, turned and walked out of his life forever. The door closed, and Liam Sterling, the brilliant millionaire, the titan of industry, crumpled to the floor. He was alone in his silent, opulent tomb, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making, haunted by the ghost of the woman he had wronged so grievously. The truth hadn't set him free. It had imprisoned him in a hell of his own guilt. The days that followed were a blur of self-inflicted torment. Liam fired anyone at Sterling Innovations who had been complicit in Amelia's scheme, dismantling the network she had built. He worked with a feverish intensity, not for ambition, but as a form of penance. But the silence of the brownstone was his true punishment. Every room held a memory of Ilara, her laughter in the kitchen, her books by the fireplace, the faint indentation on her side of the bed that he still couldn't bring himself to sleep on. He was a ghost in his own life, haunted by the magnitude of what he had done. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a fundamental failure of character. He hadn't trusted the woman he vowed to love. He had believed the serpent. Finding Ilara became his obsession. It was the only thing that mattered. He started with her old friends, the ones he had so callously allowed to be poisoned against her. The calls were excruciating, He had to swallow his pride and admit the entire sordid truth, listening to their shocked silence, their anger, their disgust. He deserved it all. None of them knew where she was. She had vanished, cutting all ties to her old life. He hired Marcus Thorne again, this time for a personal mission. "Find her," he pleaded, his voice raw. "I just need to know she's okay." The search was harder than he expected. Ilara hadn't used her credit cards or her bank accounts. She had disappeared off the grid. It took Marcus 2 weeks to find a trail, a digital breadcrumb. Ilara had sold her car a few months back, a cash transaction in a town just outside Boston. From there, Marcus used old-fashioned legwork, showing her picture at diners, motels, bus stations. Finally, he found her. She was living in a small, quiet suburb called Northwood, renting a room from a retired lawyer named Carol Sterling. The irony of the last name was not lost on Liam. "She looks healthy," Marcus reported over the phone. "Very pregnant. Seems to have a quiet life. I saw her at a community center, at some kind of class for new moms." Liam drove to Northwood the next day, his heart hammering against his ribs. He parked his car down the street from Carol's house, a modest but well-kept home with a sprawling oak tree in the front yard. He waited for hours, feeling like a stalker. Just before dusk, he saw her. Ilara emerged from the house, walking alongside an older woman, Carol, he presumed. She was wearing a simple maternity dress, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her face was fuller, softer, and she was smiling. Not a polite society smile, but a genuine, easy smile as she chatted with her friend. She looked peaceful. She placed a hand on her belly, a gesture so familiar it made his chest ache. She was no longer the broken, terrified woman he had cast out. She was whole. She had rebuilt her life from the ashes where he had left her. She had done it without him, without his money, without his name. She had done it on her own. The realization was a punch to the gut. He had come here with a vague, half-formed fantasy of a tearful reunion, of him begging for forgiveness and her falling into his arms. The nightmare finally over. But her life wasn't a nightmare anymore. He was the nightmare. He was the ghost from a past she had survived and overcome. To approach her now, to rip open those wounds for the sake of his own absolution, suddenly felt like the most selfish act of all. He watched until she went back inside the house, the warm light from the windows spilling onto the lawn. That was her world now, a world of safety and peace, a world she had built to keep monsters like him out. He drove back to Boston under a starless sky, the weight of his confession sitting like a stone in his throat. He had found her, but he was more lost than ever. He knew he had to talk to her, had to tell her the truth. But he also knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the words, "I'm sorry," would never be enough to bridge the chasm he had blasted between them. It took Liam another week to build the courage to act. He couldn't live with the lie any longer, regardless of the outcome for himself. He sent a simple, carefully worded text message to the old number he knew she no longer used, hoping it was somehow still connected to an account she might check. "Ilara, it's Liam. I know the truth about everything. All of it. I need to explain. Not for me, for you. Can we please talk?" To his astonishment, a reply came a day later. Not from the number, but from an anonymous email address. "Northwood Park, tomorrow, 3 p.m., come alone." The message was from Carol. The park was quiet on the weekday afternoon. Leaves skittered across the pavement. Ilara was sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond, her hands resting protectively on the high, taut curve of her belly. She looked beautiful and formidable. When she saw him approach, her face remained neutral, a carefully constructed mask of composure. He knew, however, that a storm of emotion must be raging beneath the surface. He stopped a few feet away, not daring to sit beside her. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm not here for you," she said, her voice steady and clear, though he could see the tension in her jaw. "I'm here because I decided my son deserves to know his father isn't a monster. I'm hoping you can convince me I'm right." The barb hit its mark. He deserved it. He didn't offer excuses or platitudes. He simply began to talk. He told her everything, starting from his own fear and insecurity, his susceptibility to Amelia's poison. He detailed the entire frame-up, the keylogger, the shell company, the recovered audio file. He spared no detail of his own weakness, his blindness, his unforgivable cruelty. He laid his soul bare on the cold ground of the park. "I didn't just fail you, Ilara," he finished, his voice breaking. "I failed our son. I failed myself. I became a man I don't recognize, and the only good thing in my life, the only pure thing, was you, and I destroyed it. I threw it away because I was weak." Tears were streaming down Ilara's face, silent and hot. They were tears of validation, of grief for the life they'd lost, of anger at the sheer, calculated malice of Amelia's plot. He had expected shouting, rage, but her quiet sorrow was so much worse. "I knew it," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "In my heart, I knew I wasn't crazy. But you made me believe I was." "I know," he said, his own tears falling freely now, "and I will spend the rest of my life regretting it." He took a step closer, his hands clenched at his sides. "I will give you anything, Ilara. A settlement that will ensure you and our son are secure for the rest of your lives. My name for him, if you'll have it. I will do whatever it takes to try and make this right." She took a long, shaky breath, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She looked at him then, truly looked at him, and for the first time, the power imbalance was gone. She held all the cards. "I don't want your money, Liam," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I have a life here, a small one, but it's mine. I earned it. Carol helped me file a lawsuit against my old firm for wrongful termination. We settled out of court. I have enough to start over. My way." She stood up, a movement that was both graceful and weary. "My son will have my name, Vance. He will be raised in a home where trust is the foundation, not a commodity to be bought and sold." His heart sank. This was it. The final door closing. "You came here and you told me the truth," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "That's more than I ever thought I'd get. It gives me closure, but it doesn't erase what happened. You're too late to fix us, Liam. There is no us to fix." She paused at the edge of the path, turning back one last time. "But maybe you're not too late to be his father. A father, not my husband. If you can prove over a very long time that you are the man you should have been, then maybe our son can have you in his life." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone by the pond. He had confessed. He had been absolved of nothing. Redemption wasn't a single act of apology. It was a long, arduous path. A path he would have to walk alone, hoping it might one day lead him back, not to her side, but to the side of the son he had almost lost before he was even born. Ilara's journey from a gilded cage of betrayal to a quiet life built on her own strength is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. She didn't find a storybook ending. She found something far more real and valuable: herself. Liam's confession was not an ending, but the beginning of a long, uncertain road toward earning a place in his child's life. If Ilara's story of survival and inner strength moved you, please honor her journey by hitting the like button, sharing this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own power, and subscribing for more emotional stories that reflect the complexities of real life. What do you think Liam's first step should be to prove he's changed? Let us know in the comments below.